I don't know how long you have been gaming, but for me, I have gone through multiple learning curves over the years, from starting with something like this in the arcades in the 80s where you had a joystick and a bunch of buttons on a flat plane, to moving into something like a Switch Pro controller, or an Xbox Series controller. There's always a learning curve with every new piece of hardware, but there's not always a learning curve with software. And the funny thing is with software is that you have a generational leap every so often that goes along with the hardware. For example, we had the NES controller, which had a D-pad and two buttons, A and B. Then we had the Super Nintendo controller, which obviously added 4 face buttons and 2 shoulder buttons, and that created a whole learning curve for people. What are we going to do with all these buttons? And, learning that muscle memory and that sort of thing to be able to time your button presses properly and coordinate your fingers to do what you want them to do. Of course, that takes time, and that is a learning curve, muscle memory, the whole 9 yards. However, with a software learning curve, you have something like, for example, for those of you who know, I started back into gaming about 9 or 10 years ago now. I've been doing this journey, maybe it wasn't 10 years ago, maybe 8 to 9 years ago. I took a huge break between the early PS2 era and the PS4 era, basically. I started back into gaming around, I would say, 2015 or so. With, repurchasing a PS2 and then getting a PS3, and I got into first-person shooters like Call of Duty on the PS3 for the very first time, and let me tell you, I was terrible at them. I had never played a game with dual-stick controls, and that camera control thing really threw me for a loop. I had come from, basically missing most of the 3D generation. I'd played on the NES, the Super NES with 2D games. I played on the PS1, but most of the games I played on the PS1 were things like racing games like Gran Turismo, that didn't really require a second stick control, or something like Final Fantasy VII or Parasite Eve, which were, again, not really dual camera control games. They were sort of top-down games, so I had never had the experience of controlling a game with dual stick controls, and it absolutely threw me for a loop. For the first several months, thank God my long-suffering cousin Mike would come over night after night after night and play with me, and he was so much better than me because he had evolved through that era. He had a PS3 when he had a PS2 and played games like SOCOM and things like that, and then evolved into a PS3 and evolved with the controls. I was coming in fresh as an adult with no experience in this, and the camera controls threw me for an absolute loop. I was not prepared for that complete learning curve. It wasn't just the idea of there's too many buttons, that although that was the case for me for sure. I had to manage these 2 thumbsticks, and I had trigger buttons that I had to shoot and aim and throw grenades, and I was constantly hitting the wrong button and constantly looking down at my controller trying to figure out, okay, which button do I press? Okay, so this is to shoot and this is to aim, okay, and by that time I'm dead. Like, even the bots in a free-for-all are killing me. I'm trying to run over and hide behind a building or something and figure out, okay, now I take out my aim button, and my cousin's saying, don't aim, just shoot from the hip when you're up close, and I'm just like, ugh. But anyways, over time, over the course of a year, I got to be okay at those games. And my long-winded point here, getting to the point, is that Tears of the Kingdom, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, has completely revolutionized gameplay yet again. This is a generational leap, folks, and I'm not talking about the graphics, I'm not talking about 900p or 30 frames a second, I'm talking about the gameplay. I'm talking about what is required in order to master this game. And let me tell you, I am having a fantastic time in Tears of the Kingdom. It is a wonderful, wonderful game, but, and this is the big but, it is a big learning curve, and I'm sure some of you have felt this way too if you've been playing the game with me here over the last few days since it launched. Breath of the Wild was one of my favorite games of all time, and having come off of the PS3 era and getting into the Wii U, I got Breath of the Wild on the Wii U when it launched, and it was pretty understandable. It was pretty standard. I would, I had the camera controls and the shooting controls with the bow and arrow and that sort of thing, and I was fine. I was fine, but Tears of the Kingdom takes this to the next level, and what it changes is not in your hands, it's in your head. And they've created this sandbox in this open world that is like no other open world game that has ever existed before it. The level of interactivity and the level of immersion as you have to sink yourself into creating solutions creatively to certain problems. Everything in the environment and everything in the world is you can do something with it. You can chop down a tree and create a crafting material, a log that you can fuse together to get across a lake, and there's so many things you can do by fusing different things with different properties to your arrows or your weapons, your shields, things like that. And this has been the real mind job for me going into this, because they have upped the difficulty on all of the enemies, even in that starting area. When you get off the Sky Islands, you're down in Hyrule, you've done your first quest, you've got your paraglide or whatever, and they send you off out into the world to find answers to the questions. And as soon as you launch away from that starter area, things get real in a hurry. One of the first things I came across was one of these battle taluses with like 4 or 5, big bokoblins up on top, and then the talus itself, and trying to figure out how to solve that puzzle, because everything is a puzzle in this game. It's not just the shrines that are puzzles, everything is an environmental puzzle that you have to solve. How am I going to strategically beat this challenge? I have to find something in the environment. I have to figure out how to get above it and shoot down from below. I've got to figure out how to craft a weapon or a vehicle or something that can go against this enemy, protect me, increase my attack power. Like, there's so many things to think about, and this is the real mind job, because looking forward, just like Breath of the Wild inspired a whole bunch of open world games with its mechanics, I think we're going to see. I don't know if I'll be able to go back to an open world game like a Far Cry and enjoy it anywhere near as much as I used to, because those open worlds feel dead, and the mechanics feel, there's just no immersion there. You're just walking through a field or a city or whatever, and there's not much interaction there. You can't pick something up and throw it at somebody. You can't pick something up. I couldn't pick up a car on the street in Call of Duty and fuse it to something and create a ladder to climb up on top of a building. Like, a lot of that stuff you can't interact with in a lot of these games, but in this game everything is interactable. And I know I'm rambling here, guys, but I'm making a point here, and that is that Tears of the Kingdom has revolutionized gaming, and Nintendo has revolutionized gaming yet again, even with a 6 or 7 year old hardware platform that everybody is saying is outdated and underpowered. They have still managed to revolutionize gaming and make a generational leap in gameplay that is blowing people's minds. The level of stuff that you can do, the level of freedom that you have in this game is like no other game that I have ever played. And that learning curve, I really wanted to talk about learning curves, because it's going to take me a while to master this game. There are so many things that you have to do. There are so many buttons you have to press. It's not just swinging your sword. Every little enemy camp that you go into, there's 6 or 7 of these gray bokoblins now, and you gotta hit each one of them like 15 times with your melee weapon. Like, that's obviously not the way. You can't just rush into a camp swinging your sword anymore. There has to be a solution, an environmental puzzle that you can take advantage of to overcome these odds in this game now, and that is really opening my eyes to a whole new level of gameplay that I have never experienced before. So anyways, guys, what do you think about Tears of the Kingdom so far? Did you have a chance to pick it up on launch day? Are you playing it with millions of other people right now? What are your thoughts? Let me know down in the comments below if you are as blown away by this game as I am, because I think this is a generational leap in software design, and I think other companies are going to have to go down this road in order to, you know, stay current with the new trends. I think this is just the way open worlds are going to have to be. Not exactly the same, but with this level of interactivity. Anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Stay classy.